topics for today are really, really interesting because it's a question that you don't get asked very often. And to reflect on your process and your practice and how you got to this point, and to have the time to think about it, it has been really fantastic. And for me, really, it was my commitment, my early commitment to social justice and fairness. And I think that came from growing up in Queensland many years ago under Joe Gilbert-Peterson's government. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with what it was like in Queensland at that time, but it was actually a really big eye-opener for a child who had a mother who was very politically active in terms of where she thought and talked and what we discussed at home. So for me as a child, I thought, well, things have got to be fair. They're just, why would they not be, being a naive child? And I thought, okay, well, if you can change things, obviously you could change them with a political framework. I thought maybe that's the way to go into politics. And I found out that politics is in fact an incredibly murky game. So I went, well, no, there's no way I can go down that path. And then I was always very interested in art, and I went, as a naive young woman like at this time, going into art school, I thought art, it has the potential to be the one true thing, the thing where you can really be honest and fair and just. And Queensland College of Art at the time was perhaps not the most progressive campus and had not a particularly great reputation in the fine art department. So I quickly found out that art has the potential to be as corrupt as any other discipline. So, well, there you go. And thought, well, no, there's a way to make things work and to do things differently. So that's what I need to strive to do. So as a young artist in Brisbane, I was very fortunate because the political situation had actually grown a great underground groundswell of very interesting artist-run spaces and initiatives that were happening, and also very strong political dialogue and discussion. So I was involved in the alternative kind of art environment that existed, and was not terribly interested in going mainstream, and was doing my own practice and exhibiting, and it was just never quite enough for me, I guess. And I really wanted to work on a social platform. So I started working in my local community of West End and South Brisbane with an organisation called Street Arts, working with local communities, and it was around things like Expo 88 that was coming into town. It was one of the last projects I worked on. So that was really about displacement of a whole area, of that area completely being changed. So it was a theatre production that I worked on. And not long after that, I actually left Brisbane and went to Melbourne. So I've been working with communities for quite some time. I've also done some touring in Western Queensland with an organisation called Children's Activity Group, and had that opportunity to work with children and also with some people with disability. So I know that's pretty interesting work. Went to Melbourne when I came, I was going to be an independent artist again, doing my own practice, and that lasted for maybe 6 months to a year, and I just went, no, I'm really itching to get back and work in a community context. So approached Arts Access, and fortunately it was one of those things about timing. They had just advertised a job as an artist in residence in a psychiatric hospital called Larundel at the time. So I applied for that position and was really lucky and actually got that job. So this was in the early days of arts and health, where artists were actually working with people who were resident in these institutions. So there wasn't a lot of knowledge or information out there about it, which in some ways I think is a really good thing. And I was coming in, there had been a theatre program, so there was a performance theatre program that had run as a residency for 3 years within that hospital, and myself and another artist came in to actually establish a visual arts program. So we were lucky that there had already been this really wonderful program that existed. And for me as a young artist with no experience, I went in there and spent 3 weeks with one of the drama people who'd been in the hospital. And really the hospital, they gave me a key, which is like the old-fashioned pass keys that opened every door. And I just thought, this is remarkable. Like fancy being an artist in this position, being given a key that opens all the doors. What can you do? What can you do? So you start opening doors. You start talking to people. You start making friends really fast. One of the really simple things was to go in, and there were lots of undercover areas between all the different wards, and you just say hello to people. And the patients were, oh gosh, someone's saying hello to me. And the ones who would really often freak out were the doctors. Because I often didn't wear my name tag either. So they would really didn't know who I was in the beginning or what was going on. So to be given that key to open every door, to be able to go into that environment without really any knowledge about mental health issues and what that meant, we established a visual arts studio in that hospital, which was the most abnormal environment in that institution, but the most normalising of environments for the people who were resident in that institution. It was warm and welcoming, so it was friendly. People were flocking to come in there and spend time and be creative. Everything that I learned about mental health came from the people who had that experience themselves of whatever issue they were dealing with, and just but through talking with them, that's how I learned. I think at Larundel, it's probably where I really learned to listen. I think that's where I really developed my skill for listening, because that was critical to be able to work with people. And I'll give you a little story from that time. There was a resident, we're talking about people who'd been institutionalised for many, many, many years too. Like, 20 years, some of them, longer, had lived in this institution. It was their home. And he was this person who had been there for a very long time and used to talk about all different subjects, and it was scattered conversation. And people obviously who worked with him regularly, they just tuned out, nobody paid him any attention. And he would come down to the studio on a regular basis. And what I would do is just listen. So we're working together and I'd listen. And so over the course of the day, when one of the charge nurses would come down and they'd go, you can understand exactly what this person is saying. And I'd go, well, yes, because all you needed to do is to listen and to piece the conversations together. And for me, it was a classic. He wanted to make a moo-moo, so be like a frock. And so I was showing him how to sew and use the machine. And I was sitting at the machine saying, now you go like this, and you pull the pedal up and you put it, and the whole time he was standing next to me, and he was just raving, he was chatting away. And I just went, after showing quite a bit, I said, okay, well, if you're not going to, if you don't want to find out and listen and, work out how to use the machine, then it's fine, we'll stop. And he just, oh no, and I had stood up, and he sat down immediately and was repeating word for word my instructions. So I think as an artist working in these environments, what it is really to start with is to go in and find the ability, what is possible. So rather than going in and starting with what an issue might be, is to actually just meet people and to find out from them what their interests are, what they want to make, what's possible, and to find a way to make that possible with them. So I'm not following my notes at all. Also, I think this grounding, I looked at this institution and went, this place is actually constructed not for the benefit of the people who reside here or come here to get well. It's constructed for the system and the services itself. So that fundamentally for me is the naive young artist was, this is not fair and it's not right and it's wrong. So the arts, I believe, have the potential to go into these places, come in from the outside and to work very differently within these frameworks and these systems. And for me as an artist, what I've identified working in the community cultural development context is that when I go into an environment, that's immediately my material. So I'm a visual artist, so I'll take whatever other, whatever visual tools that we'll be working with, but also it's the materiality of the environment that we're going into. So in that case, it was a psychiatric hospital. There are many other cases of different environments that we all go into. And I thought at this time, the thing about art is that it can bring freedom and liberty to these environments. My concern, and I think one of the challenges we face, is I thought that we're outside the box. So because I had that freedom, I was given that pass key, I could be immediately responsive So someone would ring me and say, oh Maria, we'd really like to do that, and I'd go, oh, okay, well I'll come tomorrow. And they'd go, what? I'd go, yeah, I'll come down and talk to you tomorrow. And they're used to filling things in triplicate and, you know, waiting for 3 months to get a response from somebody. So for them to actually have somebody who would respond immediately and didn't have to go through a system of approval was worked really effectively. So the whole hospital ended up just with art everywhere on the walls that was created by the residents who were living there. Then we come to a time of deinstitutionalisation, so change of government and practice of deinstitutionalisation. So people were being shipped out of the hospital that was being closed. That wasn't handled as well probably as it could be. And my thinking was we need to set something up within the community so that this work can continue. I'd also been doing a bit of work with people with intellectual disability through an Arts Access pilot program. And I'd like to talk briefly about this program because it talks about commitment to working with people in the long term. It was a pilot program where we had visual art and performance art 1 day a week, and it was over probably a 3-year period that these people had been coming and working with artists. So you've been building really strong relationships with the community that we were working with. There was one particularly young man who hated coming to do the visual art program, and for half of the day he had to do it. That's how it was. And he would be protesting and really not interested in it. And I thought, okay, so I'd try and work with that. And then one day, and he would kind of go about things as if he didn't understand what you were saying. He would just do whatever he wanted and just go about it as if I don't know what you were saying to me, so I'm not going to follow your anything that you're saying. And one day I went, oh, I won't mention names. I went, could you please go to the car and get all the boxes that I brought out of the back of the car? And because I was just doing what I was doing, and I was looking at him through out of the corner of my eye, and I could see he stopped, and he went, am I going to let her know that I know what she's saying, or am I just going to continue to be disruptive because I don't want to be here? And he went, my car, go and do it. So then our relationship really changed, because he knew that I knew that he knew what I was saying. So that was really, that was a big breakthrough for both of us to work together. But anyway, after about 3 years, the government had changed, deinstitutionalisation was happening. There was a directive from the funder, who was the state government, that this program had to be moved from the location we were working in. So to keep the funding, it had to go to another location, which meant that the people who were running the program removing it, so these people we were working with couldn't continue the program because it was in a completely different location, far away. And I just couldn't believe that they were going to drop this community of people that they'd been working with for years, and who had made so much progress and development in their practice, and had nowhere for them to go either. So had no thought to what other programs exist, what other services can we tap people into. So I had a whole range of photographs of all the people who were part of the program, and I went and met the CEO. I said, we have to talk about this. This can't happen. You have to do something. And I sat with her and I showed her a portrait of every person and said, this is, and said their name. This is who they are. This is what they were doing when they started in this project. This is what they're doing now. And went through to personalise it, because it's not just about a project or funding, or it's about the people that we're working with and our commitment to those people. And I think it's the artists often who are the ones who see that, witness it, share it, experience it, or are a part of people's lives. But it was also left up to us to be the ones to tell these people that they were never coming back. So the last day was brilliant. It was difficult and very, very hard. And this particular person that I told you the story about earlier, we were giving everything to them, all their visual diaries and all their artwork, everything to take with them. And he just couldn't understand what was happening and why he couldn't come back. And at the end of the day, he had his visual diary we had a storeroom where we stored things. And he came back, snuck back in, and put it back into that room, thinking that he could return if his visual diary was there. Anyway, it's a very sad story. But from that point on, I really want to commit to working with people if I can, wherever I can, for as long as they want to work with me. So if that's possible, that's what I'll seek to do in the future. So I was also, not long after that, I piloted a project in a youth refuge with homeless young people. It was run by the Salvation Army, and it was a 16-week program. So I went in and worked with these young people and made artwork that would go into their house and then would leave with them, some of it as they moved into other housing. And that went very well. So the Salvation Army, I was also very lucky because it's all about people, isn't it? So there was a wonderful manager who had great foresight and went, this is fantastic. But these young people who couldn't attend school had very low levels of attention to tasks, were engaging in a 3-hour workshop, completely engaged in working together. And she was just stunned by that. And also the fact that the staff were involved. So when I work with people, it's whoever's there works. So there's no difference between a staff person or a support worker, or everyone comes together, we all work together. And what she also noticed in terms of the culture, working with the culture of that youth refuge, is that by working on the artistic program, it was a great leveller between the young people and the staff members as well. So they continued to fund that program, and I continued to work there with these young people. And the young people, we've been doing it for a couple of years, and I was learning a whole lot of stuff with them. They go, we want to do some wood carving, some sculpture for the garden. I go, I've never done that before, but if you like, we can learn how to do that together. So we learned how to do that together. And they came back with a conversation about press reports of young people that they knew in the newspaper about how bad they were, and they were all injecting drug users. There were photographs of these young people shooting up in a park, which apparently had been set up by a journalist. So these young people came back with these stories about how they were being portrayed in the media really negatively. And from my work with people with mental health issues and that desire to get more information and knowledge out to the community about mental health, I had thought, wouldn't it be fantastic if we could make work that then went out into public space using communication media like advertising space. So let's use space to actually get the message from these people out into the public domain to grow understanding and awareness. So with mental health issues, they might give an advertising company, I don't know what, $1 million, $500,000, $2 million to run a campaign, a billboard campaign on the streets. Imagine if that money is actually going into the arts, into an artistic program where artists are working with these communities, and those communities are making of mine to look at the potential of actually getting work from community out into the streets and the public domain. So when these young people came back with this conversation, I went, would you be interested in doing a project around this? And they went, oh yeah, that'd be great. So we applied to the Australian Council for the Arts, because otherwise this project had internally been funded by the Salvos. So we went for some program funding, for some development money to do a project, to do a series of billboards. And I thought, rather than me talking about it, I'm going to show you, have we got time? I've lost track of time. I don't know, Thursdays. Anyway, I'd like to share, it's about 5 minutes. It was made back in 1999, so it's not high definition, it's a bit scratchy, so I thought it best if the young people themselves talk about the process and you see the work that was created. But through this project, Visionary Images was born, and a particular methodology of practice, which is really about collaboration, because before, perhaps my practice could be more about facilitation, and now it was really, truly coming together as collaboration. The artists and communities workers, have I got 5 minutes left?
Yes.
Oh my goodness. All right, I'm gonna have to leave you with this documentary because it's 5 minutes long. But there's so much more I could say. I'm sorry that it's taken me a while to get through it. But from this, we've grown. We've done lots of different work. So we've done billboard projects. It's all on the Visionary website, which you can have a look at, and I'd be really happy to talk to any of you further about it. So we've done billboard projects. We've done installations in the city. We've done a massive inflatable called the Glow Show, which was all about tampering children overboard in terms of thinking and conversation, animations, street posters, and a located media game where young people identified we're going to make a game for the computer screens, and the young men who were coming into the studio were saying we're increasingly spending time in a digitised world, and that's really having an impact on the way we communicate in the real world. So then we found out about this phenomenon called located media and went, wouldn't it be great, rather than to just go into a screen, to use information communication technologies to communicate with people, to get them away from their screens and out onto the streets in everyday life. And the work that they go and see is still, some of it's still screen-based, but they're interacting with each other, and through their mobile phones they're interacting with this game. So it's called a located media game. It's Allure, A-L-U-R-E, A-L-U-R-E. So I'd love to talk to you further about all of these projects, but I'm going to leave you with the very first documentary, Visionary Images, and I hope it gives you an idea of the people behind the work and their ideas and vision and thinking and some of the work itself. So I want to thank you so much for listening to me.
And how we felt these days about stuff. Hopeless.